A day like any other. Isaiah Carter woke up to the soft hum of his city, a blend of car horns, distant chatter, and the occasional wail of an ambulance. For most, it was just noise, but for Isaiah, it was a reminder of resilience. Every sound echoed the life he fought for, the life he refused to surrender after the accident that changed everything. He sat at the edge of his bed, adjusting his prosthetic leg, the cool metal a stark contrast to his warm skin. Despite the years, the routine hadn't gotten easier. Each morning, the weight of his injury reminded him of the fragility of life. But Isaiah had never been one to yield. Today was a day like any other, or so he thought, a mall filled with contrasts. The city's largest shopping mall was a testament to excess. Polished floors reflected the glow of chandeliers. Luxury stores flaunted their wares. And the air was thick with the scent of designer perfumes. Isaiah navigated the space with practiced ease, his crutches tapping against the tiles with a rhythmic certainty. Yet, for all its opulence, the mall was a microcosm of society's divides. Isaiah couldn't help but notice the sideways glances, the fleeting looks of pity or discomfort. He wasn't new to these reactions, he'd encountered them in courtrooms, boardrooms, and even on the streets. But today, they seemed sharper, more cutting. The encounter, balancing a heavy shopping bag in one hand and his crutch in the other. Isaiah approached the escalator. The strain was evident in his posture. Yet he pressed on. That's when he noticed him, Martin Blake, the mall's security guard, middle-aged, broad-shouldered, with a permanent scowl etched into his face. Martin stood near the escalator, arms crossed. "Need a hand there, buddy?" Martin's voice dripped with sarcasm, loud enough to draw attention. A few shoppers paused, their curiosity piqued. Isaiah stopped, meeting Martin's gaze. "No, thank you, I've got it." But Martin wasn't done. "Funny, a man like you, thinking he doesn't need help. Or maybe you're just too proud." Huh? Isaiah's jaw tightened. He'd faced ignorance before, but the deliberate malice in Martin's tone struck a nerve. "I said I'm fine," Isaiah replied, his voice firm but controlled. "Suit yourself," Martin muttered, stepping aside with an exaggerated shrug. But as Isaiah moved past, he felt the guard's gaze burning into his back, a tipping point. Moments later, Isaiah found himself at the food court, struggling to manage his bags while maneuvering to a nearby table. The weight of the items shifted unexpectedly, and one of the bags tumbled to the floor. Before he could steady himself, Martin reappeared, a cruel grin spreading across his face. "Well, look at that," Martin sneered. "Guess you're not as fine as you thought." Isaiah ignored him, reaching down to pick up the bag. But Martin wasn't finished. With a sudden movement, he kicked one of Isaiah's crutches out from under him. The world tilted as Isaiah lost his balance, crashing to the floor amidst a collective gasp from onlookers. The pain was immediate and sharp, radiating from his prosthetic leg to his hip. Isaiah looked up, breathless, as Martin loomed over him, his face twisted with satisfaction. "Maybe next time, you'll learn some respect," Martin said, his voice low but venomous. The witnesses. For a moment, silence hung heavy in the air. Then, a voice rang out. "Hey, what the hell are you doing?" It was a young woman. Her phone raised, capturing the scene. Others began to murmur, their outrage growing as the gravity of the situation sank in. A middle-aged man rushed to help Isaiah up, while a teenage boy called mall management. Martin's confidence wavered. "Mind your business," he snapped at the crowd. But the damage was done. The bystanders' disgust was palpable, their phones documenting every angle of the assault. Isaiah, still on the ground, locked eyes with Martin. Despite the physical pain, his expression was one of quiet determination. "You've made a big mistake," he said, his voice steady despite the chaos. The aftermath. By the time mall security supervisors arrived, the situation had escalated. Martin attempted to downplay his actions, claiming self-defense, but the video evidence told a different story. Isaiah refused medical attention, determined to leave the scene on his own terms. As he exited the mall, a young man approached him. "Sir, I'm so sorry for what happened. I recorded everything, I'll send it to you if you want." Isaiah paused, taking the man's phone number. "Thank you," he said, his gratitude genuine. "This isn't just about me anymore." A storm brewing. That evening, Isaiah sat in his apartment, replaying the incident in his mind. The humiliation was fresh, but so was the resolve. He opened his laptop, reviewing the footage sent by witnesses. The images of Martin's cruelty and the indifference of the bystanders stoked a fire within him. Isaiah wasn't just a man with a prosthetic leg. He was a man with a purpose. A lawyer who knew the law inside and out. And now, he had a mission: to ensure that Martin Blake, and anyone like him, would face the full weight of justice. The first email he sent was to his legal team. The subject line read, "Let's begin, a morning of strength." Isaiah Carter began his day with the ritual that had come to define him, not the act of donning his prosthetic leg, but the mental preparation it symbolized. Each buckle and strap was a declaration of defiance, a silent vow that no challenge, no prejudice, would break him. The morning sunlight streamed through his window, casting shadows on the certificates and accolades that adorned his walls. They told the story of a man who had risen above his circumstances, a top-tier lawyer, a fierce advocate for justice, and a man who had turned tragedy into triumph. But for all his accomplishments, Isaiah was not naive. The world he fought to make fairer was still riddled with bias and cruelty. He felt it in every sideways glance, every moment when strangers saw his prosthetic leg before they saw him. Today, however, he wasn't dwelling on those realities. Today was about running errands and enjoying a rare day off. The mall. A world within a world. Isaiah arrived at the Parkview Galleria, the city's crown jewel of commerce. The mall buzzed with activity. Couples browsing for the latest gadgets, children tugging their parents toward toy stores, and impeccably dressed shoppers striding into high-end boutiques. The air hummed with the soft melody of the mall's ambient music, punctuated by the occasional announcement about sales. Isaiah moved through the crowd with practiced confidence, his crutches clicking against the polished marble floor. He ignored the stares, the brief flickers of pity in the eyes of passers-by. For him, this was routine. People saw his prosthetic leg and assumed weakness. What they didn't see was the steel resolve beneath. His first stop was a bookstore, where he picked up a few titles on criminal justice reform. Next came a gourmet store for a bottle of wine, a gift for a colleague. Finally, he approached the escalator, his arms weighed down by several bags. That's when he noticed the security guard, the shadow of prejudice. Martin Blake stood at his post near the escalator, his uniform crisp but his demeanor anything but professional. His piercing gaze locked onto Isaiah with a mix of curiosity and disdain. Martin was the kind of man Isaiah had dealt with his whole life, someone who mistook Isaiah's prosthetic leg as a symbol of inferiority. As Isaiah adjusted his grip on his crutches, Martin took a step forward. "Need some help, pal?" His tone was laced with mockery, loud enough to turn heads. Isaiah stopped and met Martin's gaze, calm but firm. "No, thank you. I've got it under control." Martin's lips curled into a smirk. "Sure you do. Guess you're used to being slower." A few passers-by slowed, sensing tension. Isaiah didn't flinch. "Have a good day," he said, brushing past Martin with the dignity of a man who had faced far worse. A moment of collapse. Isaiah reached the food court, balancing his bags and scanning for an empty table. The weight of his purchases began to take its toll. His grip faltered, and one of the bags slipped, its contents spilling onto the floor. A bottle of wine rolled away, drawing stares from nearby diners. He bent down, carefully balancing on his crutches to retrieve it, when a shadow loomed over him. Well, Martin's voice drawled. "Looks like you're not as steady as you thought." Isaiah straightened, clutching the bottle. "I don't need your commentary." "Oh, I'm just doing my job, making sure you don't make a mess," Martin retorted. His voice was louder now, drawing more attention. Isaiah turned to leave, unwilling to escalate the situation. But as he shifted his weight onto his prosthetic leg, Martin's boot shot out, hooking onto one of Isaiah's crutches. The world tilted. Isaiah fell hard, the impact jarring his entire body. Pain shot up from his hip as gasps erupted around him. His bags scattered, their contents strewn across the floor. For a moment, all he could hear was the pounding of his own heartbeat. The world watches. A circle of bystanders formed, their expressions a mix of shock and hesitation. Some raised their phones, recording the scene. A teenage girl whispered to her mother, "Why did he do that?" Isaiah lay on the cold marble, his breath coming in ragged gasps. He looked up at Martin, who towered over him with a smug grin. "Maybe next time you'll learn to respect those trying to help." Martin sneered. The crowd began to murmur. Did you see that? He tripped him on purpose. A young woman in a hoodie stepped forward. Her phone raised. Hey, this isn't right. You can't just do that to someone. Martin's confidence faltered for a brief moment. But he quickly barked back. Mind your business. This doesn't concern you. It concerns everyone. The woman shot back, her voice shaking with anger. You attacked him. A spark of resistance. Isaiah pushed himself up with great effort, his prosthetic leg throbbing from the fall. A middle-aged man in a business suit rushed to help him, steadying him as he regained his footing. Are you okay? The man asked. Isaiah nodded, his face a mask of calm. But inside, a storm raged. He turned to Martin, his voice low but cutting. You've crossed a line. Martin scoffed. What are you gonna do about it? Sue me? Isaiah's lips curled into a faint smile. Something like that. A tipping point. Mall management arrived minutes later, their faces pale as they assessed the situation. Witnesses eagerly played back their recordings, each video painting a damning picture of Martin's actions. Martin tried to defend himself, claiming Isaiah had stumbled, but the evidence was overwhelming. Mr. Carter, we'll handle this internally, one of the managers assured him. But Isaiah wasn't interested in placation. No, he replied, his voice steady. You'll hear from my team. As he left the mall, the young woman who had confronted Martin approached him. I recorded everything, she said, handing Isaiah her contact information. I'm so sorry this happened to you. Isaiah looked at her, gratitude softening his expression. Thank you. You've done more than you know. The fire within. That evening, Isaiah sat in his home office. The videos and witness statements displayed on his laptop screen. The incident replayed in his mind, not the pain, but the malice, the arrogance of a man who thought he could act without consequence. Isaiah was no stranger to the law. He knew it could be both a weapon and a shield. And now, he would wield it with precision. With a deep breath, he opened an email draft to his legal team. His fingers hovered over the keyboard before typing. Let's make this right. The night was silent, but for Isaiah, it was the calm before the storm. A storm he intended to unleash the weight of injustice. Isaiah sat quietly on a bench in the mall's atrium after the incident, his body aching but his mind sharper than ever. The scattered voices of shoppers echoed around him, but their words felt distant. He gripped his crutches tightly, his knuckles white. The humiliation still burned. Martin's face, twisted with cruelty, lingered in his memory. He watched the crowd from his seat, people walking by with indifference, some sneaking glances his way, others hurriedly looking away. The world always seemed to keep moving, even when it should stop. And that, Isaiah thought, was part of the problem. Silence and indifference allowed men like Martin to thrive. The conversation that sparked action. A soft voice interrupted his thoughts. Excuse me, are you all right? Isaiah looked up to see the young woman from earlier, the one who had recorded the incident. Her name was Rachel Liu, and she couldn't have been more than 25. Her hands trembled slightly as she handed him a bottle of water. Thank you, Isaiah said, his voice calm but tinged with exhaustion. I couldn't just stand there, Rachel said, sitting down beside him. What that man did, it was disgusting. And nobody stepped in. I mean, people were recording, but no one did anything to stop him. Isaiah nodded, his expression thoughtful. People freeze. They're afraid of getting involved or making things worse. Rachel frowned. But you shouldn't have to face that alone. What he did wasn't just wrong, it was criminal. I sent the video to some friends already. It's going to spread. Isaiah raised an eyebrow. You posted it online? Not yet, Rachel clarified. But I will if you want me to. People need to see what happened. Isaiah took a deep breath. I appreciate your support, but this isn't just about me. If we're going to do this, it needs to be the right way. Rachel's eyes brightened. So, what's the plan? Isaiah's lips curved into a faint smile. Justice. The hidden layers of Martin Blake. Later that evening, Isaiah sat at his desk, his laptop glowing in the dimly lit room. He was no stranger to deep dives into people's lives. His work as a lawyer required uncovering hidden truths. Tonight, his target was Martin Blake. It didn't take long for him to find cracks in Martin's armor. A search through public records and online databases revealed a troubling history. Martin had been dismissed from a previous job for inappropriate conduct, though the details were vague. A news article from years ago mentioned his involvement in an altercation at a local diner, where a black man had accused Martin of assaulting him unprovoked. Isaiah leaned back in his chair, the pieces beginning to fall into place. Martin wasn't just a man with a bad attitude, he was a pattern. A symptom of a larger issue. He picked up his phone and called Sophia Nguyen, his closest colleague and a rising star in the legal world. Her voice was sharp and alert, even late at night. "Isaiah, what's going on?" she asked. "I need you to look into someone for me." Isaiah replied, "Martin Blake, security guard at the Parkview Galleria. Something tells me this isn't the first time he's crossed the line." Sophia was silent for a moment. "You're thinking lawsuit?" "More than that," Isaiah said. "I'm thinking accountability. For him, for them all, and for everyone who enabled this. The broader implications." The following day, Isaiah met with his legal team in their downtown office. The atmosphere was tense but focused. Rachel had joined them, eager to contribute in any way she could. Sophia stood by the whiteboard, jotting down key points as Isaiah spoke. "This isn't just about assault. It's about systemic negligence. The mall failed to vet this man properly. They ignored warning signs, and now they're complicit." Marcus Torres, their investigator, chimed in. "I've already started digging into Martin's employment history. He's been shuffled from job to job, each time leaving under suspicious circumstances. It's a classic case of someone slipping through the cracks." Sophia added, "If we can prove that the mall knew, or should have known, about his history, we have a strong case for negligence." Isaiah nodded. "Good, but we're not stopping there. This is bigger than one man. We're going to use this case to send a message." Rachel hesitated before speaking. "Do you think it'll make a difference? I mean, people see stuff like this all the time, and nothing changes." Isaiah looked at her, his gaze steady. "It will make a difference because we'll make sure it does. Change doesn't happen by waiting, it happens by fighting." The storm begins. Word of the incident spread quickly. The video Rachel had taken was leaked anonymously and began circulating on social media. Within hours, it had thousands of views. Comments flooded in, some expressing outrage, others defending Martin with thinly veiled racism. Local news outlets picked up the story, and reporters began contacting Isaiah for interviews. He declined, choosing to let the evidence speak for itself. But the media attention was a double-edged sword. While it brought support, it also painted a target on Isaiah's back. That evening, as Isaiah returned home, he noticed a figure standing near his building. It was Martin. "You think you're smart, don't you?" Martin snarled, stepping closer, dragging my name through the mud, making me the bad guy. Isaiah remained calm, his voice cold and precise. "You did that to yourself." Martin's face twisted with rage. "You don't know who you're messing with." Isaiah took a step forward, his crutches steadying him. "And you don't know who I am. But you're about to find out." Martin's bravado faltered. Without another word, he turned and stalked away. But the tension lingered in the air. Isaiah watched him go, a quiet determination in his eyes, a catalyst for change. Isaiah's case against Martin and the mall wasn't just personal, it was a battle for justice. As the legal team prepared for the fight ahead, Isaiah reflected on the deeper implications. This wasn't just about one man's prejudice or one mall's negligence. It was about a system that allowed people like Martin to thrive unchecked. In the days that followed, Isaiah's story became a rallying cry for change. Community leaders, activists, and everyday citizens joined the cause, demanding accountability not just for Isaiah but for everyone who had ever faced similar injustice. And at the center of it all was Isaiah, a man who had faced the worst of humanity and emerged stronger. He wasn't just fighting for himself, he was fighting for a world where no one else would have to endure what he had. Isaiah's resolve. The morning sunlight filtered through the tall windows of Isaiah's law firm, casting long shadows on the conference table. He stood at the head, leaning lightly on his crutches, his prosthetic leg hidden beneath the tailored fabric of his suit. His team, an eclectic mix of sharp legal minds, sat around the table, their faces a mix of concern and determination. Sophia Nguyen, his trusted protege, broke the silence. "We've all seen the footage. This isn't just an assault, it's an attack on everything we stand for." Isaiah nodded, his voice measured but resolute. "Martin Blake's actions are the symptom of a deeper disease. This case isn't just about him. It's about systemic negligence, unchecked prejudice, and a culture that allows this behavior to thrive." Marcus Torres, the firm's investigator, leaned forward. "I've started digging. Martin's past is messy. He's been fired from 2 previous security jobs for misconduct. One of those involved excessive force against another black man. The other? Allegations of harassment that were swept under the rug. Sophia frowned, scribbling notes. And the mall hired him anyway? Without a proper background check? Marcus smirked darkly. Looks like they cared more about filling the position than vetting the person. Isaiah let out a slow breath, his gaze sweeping the room. This isn't just a lawsuit, it's a statement. We're going to prove negligence, hold them all accountable, and make Martin answer for every person he's hurt. Uncovering the pattern. Over the next week, Isaiah's team dived headfirst into their investigation. Marcus pored over employment records, court filings, and old police reports, piecing together a troubling pattern of Martin's behavior. Each discovery added another layer to their case. One report stood out: a dismissed lawsuit filed by a black family 5 years ago. The father, a warehouse worker, claimed that Martin, then a security supervisor, had assaulted him in front of his children during a mall outing. The case never went to trial. The family lacked resources to fight, and the mall had buried it with a quiet settlement. Isaiah stared at the report in disbelief. They knew, he muttered, anger simmering beneath his calm exterior. They knew what he was capable of, and they hired him anyway. Sophia glanced up from her laptop. It gets worse. Martin's personnel file at the mall? It's suspiciously thin. No evaluations, no complaints, nothing. Either they didn't bother keeping records, or they destroyed them. Marcus tapped his tablet, or they never wanted a paper trail. The mall's legal team is going to argue they didn't know. Our job is to prove they should have known. A visit to the past. Isaiah decided to meet the family from the dismissed lawsuit. He drove to a modest neighborhood on the outskirts of the city, where he found Andre Williams, a soft-spoken man with tired eyes. Andre welcomed Isaiah into his home, offering coffee as they sat in the small living room. I thought no one cared about what happened to us, Andre said, his voice heavy. We tried to fight, but they had better lawyers, more money. We just couldn't win. Isaiah leaned forward, his tone empathetic. What happened to you and your family matters. Andre, what Martin did to you wasn't just wrong, it was criminal. I'm building a case against him and the mall, and your story could make a difference. Andre hesitated, glancing at a faded photograph of his family on the wall. It's been years, Mr. Carter. I don't want to dredge it all up again. I understand, Isaiah said gently, but this isn't just about me or even you. It's about making sure no one else has to go through this. After a long pause, Andre nodded. If it'll help, I'll testify. My kids still remember what happened. They deserve to see justice, even if it's years late. The courtroom showdown begins. The case officially began with a flurry of motions and filings. The mall's legal team was formidable, led by Victoria Hale, a ruthless attorney known for burying her opponents in technicalities. From the start, they tried to dismiss the lawsuit, arguing that Martin's actions were outside the scope of his employment, and that the mall had no prior knowledge of his history. Isaiah and his team countered with evidence. They presented Martin's employment records, old complaints, and the testimony of Andre Williams. Each piece painted a damning picture of negligence and complicity. The first hearing was a battleground. Victoria Hale argued with precision, attacking every piece of evidence. Your Honor, she said, her tone dripping with condescension, this is a baseless attempt to tarnish my client's reputation. The plaintiff has no proof that the mall knowingly employed a dangerous individual. Isaiah stood, his voice steady and commanding. Your Honor, we have records, testimonies, and video evidence that tell a very different story. The mall didn't just fail to vet Martin Blake. They ignored red flags that would have protected countless people. The judge allowed the case to proceed, setting the stage for a high-stakes trial. The trial, a battle for justice. The trial was a media spectacle, with cameras lining the courthouse steps. Inside, the courtroom was tense, every word scrutinized by reporters and spectators alike. Isaiah's opening statement was powerful. This case is about accountability. It's about a system that prioritizes profit over people, that allows prejudice to thrive unchecked. My client isn't just seeking compensation, he's seeking change. The prosecution called witnesses who recounted Martin's history of misconduct. Andre Williams took the stand, his voice trembling as he described the fear his children felt when Martin attacked him. They still have nightmares, he said, his eyes glistening with tears. They asked me why no one stopped him. Victoria Hale tried to discredit the witnesses, painting them as unreliable or exaggerating. But each time, Isaiah countered with calm precision, using facts to dismantle her arguments. When it was Isaiah's turn to testify, the courtroom fell silent. He recounted the mall incident with raw emotion, describing the pain, not just physical, but the humiliation and helplessness he felt. "I'm not here because I couldn't defend myself," he said. "I'm here because no one should have to." A turning point. The turning point came when Marcus uncovered an internal email from a former mall manager. The email, dated years earlier, warned upper management about Martin's behavior, describing him as volatile and unfit for security work. The email had been ignored. When Isaiah presented the email in court, the jury's reaction was palpable. Victoria Hale's confident facade cracked as she tried to explain it away. But the damage was done. The mall's negligence was undeniable. The verdict. After weeks of testimony, the jury deliberated for hours. When they returned, the verdict was clear. Martin Blake was found guilty of assault, and the mall was held liable for negligence. The court awarded Isaiah substantial damages. But more importantly, the decision set a precedent. Justice ripples outward. The trial's impact extended far beyond the courtroom. The mall announced sweeping reforms, including stricter hiring practices and mandatory diversity training. Martin was sentenced to prison, his smug arrogance replaced by regret. Isaiah, though victorious, remained humble. In interviews, he emphasized that the case wasn't about revenge. "This is about accountability," he told reporters. "It's about ensuring that what happened to me, and to so many others, never happens again." Isaiah's strategy: building a fortress of justice. In the days following the incident, Isaiah Carter transformed from a victim into a man on a mission. His office became a war room, every desk piled high with evidence, every screen displaying documents, video clips, and records. The hum of determination filled the air, punctuated by the click of keyboards and murmured strategy discussions. Sophia Nguyen stood by the whiteboard, marker in hand, sketching out the case's key elements: assault, negligence, systemic failure. Isaiah, leaning on his crutches, pointed at the word negligence. "This is where we hit them hardest," he said. Martin Blake's actions were horrific, but he didn't exist in a vacuum. The mall created an environment where someone like him could thrive, unchecked and unchallenged. "We'll prove they knew and did nothing." Sophia nodded. "What about witnesses? Rachel's video is powerful, but we need more voices." Isaiah's gaze hardened. "We'll get them. People are angry, and anger can be a powerful ally." Marcus Torres, their investigator, looked up from his laptop. "I've got leads on former employees who worked with Martin. Some of them might be willing to talk, especially if they've got grievances of their own." Isaiah smiled faintly. "Good, let's start there." The shadows of the past. Marcus's search led him to Lisa Howard, a former mall employee who had worked alongside Martin as a customer service representative. When Marcus and Isaiah met her at a small coffee shop on the outskirts of the city, she seemed nervous, glancing around as if expecting someone to burst in. "I don't know if I can help you," Lisa said, stirring her coffee absent-mindedly. "I've tried to forget about that place." Isaiah leaned forward, his tone gentle but firm. "Lisa, you don't have to be afraid. We're here to protect you. But what you know could help stop this from happening to someone else." Lisa hesitated before sighing deeply. "Martin, he was always mean. Not just to customers, but to everyone. He'd make these nasty comments, especially to black employees. Once, he told a janitor to go back to the jungle. I reported him to our, but they said I was overreacting." "Do you have proof of those reports?" Isaiah asked. Lisa shook her head. "I didn't keep copies, but other people complained too. If you find them, they'll tell you the same thing." Isaiah's jaw tightened. "We will. And thank you, Lisa. What you've told us matters." A media storm. Rachel Liu's video began circulating online, quickly gaining traction. Within days, it had amassed thousands of views, sparking outrage. Social media exploded with hashtags like #JusticeForIsaiah and #HoldThemAccountable. Activists organized protests outside the mall, demanding answers. The mall's PR team scrambled to contain the damage, releasing a statement that was as hollow as it was predictable. We take these allegations seriously and are conducting an internal investigation. Isaiah watched the news coverage from his office. Shaking his head, "They're stalling," he said to Sophia, hoping the noise dies down. Sophia smirked. "They don't know who they're dealing with." The opposition strikes back. Victoria Hale, the mall's lead attorney, was as ruthless as they came. Her first move was to file a motion to dismiss the case, arguing that Martin Blake's actions were personal conduct and not reflective of the mall's policies. She painted Isaiah as a litigious opportunist, more interested in money than justice. Isaiah read the motion with a grim expression. "They're playing dirty," he said, "but they're underestimating us." In the pretrial hearing, Victoria's sharp voice filled the courtroom. "Your Honor, this lawsuit is based on a single incident involving an employee acting outside the scope of his duties. The mall cannot and should not be held responsible for Mr. Blake's actions." Isaiah rose, his presence commanding. "Your Honor, this is not an isolated incident. Martin Blake's history of misconduct is well documented, and the mall ignored every warning sign. This isn't just about one man. It's about a system that allowed him to act with impunity." The judge denied the motion to dismiss, setting a trial date. Outside the courthouse, reporters swarmed Isaiah, their questions coming rapid fire. "Mr. Carter, how do you feel about today's decision?" Isaiah paused, his expression calm but resolute. "Today was a small victory. But the fight is far from over. This isn't just about me, it's about holding institutions accountable for their failures." The trial, a battle of wills. The trial began under intense media scrutiny. The courtroom was packed with journalists, activists, and spectators. The jury, carefully selected, represented a cross-section of the city, diverse, thoughtful, and keenly aware of the case's significance. Isaiah's opening statement was powerful, setting the tone for the proceedings. "This case is about accountability," he began. "It's about a man who abused his position of power and an institution that looked the other way. Today, we seek not just justice for what happened, but change to ensure it doesn't happen again." Victoria Hale, ever confident, countered with precision. "Ladies and gentlemen, the plaintiffs will try to convince you that the mall is responsible for the actions of one rogue employee. But the evidence will show that this is a baseless claim." Key witnesses. The prosecution called a series of witnesses, each adding weight to the case. Andre Williams. His testimony about Martin's past assault was heart-wrenching. He described the humiliation of being attacked in front of his children and the helplessness he felt when the case was buried. "My kids still ask me why no one helped," he said, his voice breaking. Lisa Howard. She recounted Martin's history of racist comments and the mall's failure to act. "They knew what he was like," she said, "but they didn't care. They just wanted him to keep things under control." Rachel Liu. As the person who recorded the incident, Rachel testified about what she saw that day. "He didn't just trip Isaiah," she said. "He meant to hurt him. You could see it in his face." A bombshell revelation. The turning point came when Marcus Torres unearthed an internal email chain from the mall's HR department. The emails revealed that multiple employees had filed complaints against Martin, describing him as aggressive, racist, and a liability. One email from a manager read, "Martin Blake is a ticking time bomb. If something happens, it's on us." When the emails were presented in court, the jury's reaction was palpable. Victoria Hale scrambled to discredit them, but the damage was done. The mall's negligence was undeniable. Closing arguments. In his closing statement, Isaiah appealed to the jury's sense of justice. "This case is not just about what happened to me. It's about what happens when institutions ignore the truth. When they prioritize profit over people. You have the power to send a message that this kind of negligence will no longer be tolerated." Victoria's closing argument was coldly technical, focusing on legal precedents and minimizing the mall's responsibility. But her words rang hollow in the face of the evidence. The verdict. After 3 days of deliberation, the jury returned with their decision. Martin Blake was found guilty of assault, and the mall was held liable for gross negligence. The court awarded Isaiah substantial damages. But the real victory was the precedent set. Justice as a catalyst. The verdict sent shockwaves through the city. The mall announced sweeping reforms, including stricter hiring practices and anti-discrimination training. Activists celebrated the case as a turning point in the fight against systemic injustice. Isaiah, though relieved, remained focused. In interviews, he emphasized the broader implications of the case. "This isn't just about me," he said. "It's about creating a society where no one has to endure what I did." Isaiah's reflections. A quiet storm. Late one evening, Isaiah sat in his office, the city lights twinkling through the window behind him. His desk was cluttered with legal briefs, depositions, and notes from his team. Yet his gaze was fixed on the framed photo of his late mother, a woman who had always taught him the value of standing up for what was right, no matter the cost. Isaiah thought back to the incident at the mall. The pain he felt that day wasn't just physical, it was the weight of years of prejudice. The subtle and overt ways society reminded him of what it thought he was worth. But now, he had a chance to turn that pain into purpose. He took a deep breath, picked up his pen, and began outlining the next steps. This wasn't just a legal battle, it was a fight for dignity, for accountability, for change. Building the case. Layers of complexity. The team's investigation delved deeper, uncovering a tangled web of negligence and systemic failure. Marcus Torres presented his findings during a late-night strategy meeting. "Martin Blake isn't just a rogue employee," Marcus said, scrolling through documents on his tablet. "He's a symptom of a much bigger problem." The mall's HR department received at least 8 complaints about him over the years, but they either dismissed them or quietly settled with the complainants. Sophia Nguyen, pacing the room, added, "And the mall's hiring process is a joke. They didn't even conduct a proper background check. If they had, they'd have seen his record of misconduct." Isaiah leaned forward, his voice calm but firm. "This is what we need to emphasize. Martin's actions are reprehensible, but the mall's inaction is what enabled him. They prioritized convenience over safety, profit over accountability." Sophia nodded. "We need to humanize this for the jury. Show them the real impact of these decisions, not just on you, but on everyone Martin has hurt." A personal connection. As the team worked tirelessly, Isaiah decided to revisit the neighborhood where he grew up. It was a place that had shaped him, a place where resilience was woven into the fabric of life. He stopped by a community center where he had once volunteered as a young law student, teaching underprivileged youth about their rights. "Mr. Carter," a voice called out. Isaiah turned to see Darius, a young man he had mentored years ago, now in his early 20s. Darius was studying to become a lawyer himself. "I saw what happened to you on the news," Darius said, his voice filled with both anger and admiration. "It's messed up, but you're fighting back, and you're inspiring a lot of us." Isaiah smiled, placing a hand on Darius's shoulder. "That's what this is about. Not just winning a case, but showing people that they can stand up for themselves." Darius hesitated before asking, "Do you think things will ever really change?" Isaiah's expression grew serious. "Change doesn't happen overnight, and it doesn't happen without resistance. But every fight, every victory, pushes us closer to the world we want to see." A conversation with Rachel. Meanwhile, Rachel Liu, the young woman who had recorded the incident, became an unexpected ally in Isaiah's journey. She visited the law firm one afternoon, carrying a notebook filled with her own notes and observations. "I've been thinking about what happened," Rachel said, sitting across from Isaiah, "and I realized, it's not just about that one moment. It's about all the little moments leading up to it. All the times people like Martin get away with things because no one wants to make a fuss." Isaiah nodded. "That's exactly right. Injustice thrives in silence." Rachel hesitated, then said, "I've been getting messages online, some supportive, but a lot of them, hateful. People saying I should have stayed out of it. That I'm just stirring the pot." Isaiah's gaze softened. "Speaking out comes with risks, Rachel, but your courage made a difference. You held up a mirror to the world. And not everyone likes what they see." Rachel smiled faintly. "I just want to help. However I can." "You already have," Isaiah replied, "and if you're willing, your testimony in court will be even more powerful." A surprising ally. As the trial approached, Isaiah received an unexpected call from Eleanor Pierce, a former manager at the mall. Eleanor had resigned years ago, frustrated by what she described as a toxic culture of apathy and negligence. "I saw the news," Eleanor said when they met in a quiet cafe, "and I couldn't stay silent anymore. I was there when Martin was hired. I remember raising concerns about his attitude during the interview process. But the higher-ups overruled me. They said he was cheap and available. Isaiah listened intently as Eleanor recounted instances where Martin's behavior had been reported and ignored. They didn't want to deal with the hassle of firing him, she said. It was easier to sweep everything under the rug. Would you be willing to testify? Isaiah asked. Eleanor hesitated, her expression conflicted. I've moved on from that place. But, yes, people need to know the truth. The stakes rise. The mall's legal team, led by Victoria Hale, intensified their efforts to discredit Isaiah and his case. They launched a PR campaign, portraying Martin's actions as an isolated incident and Isaiah as a disgruntled opportunist. Victoria even attempted to suppress the damning internal emails Marcus had uncovered, arguing they were irrelevant to the case. But Isaiah's team fought back, filing motions to ensure every piece of evidence was admissible. This is their playbook, Sophia said during a late-night strategy session. Deflect, discredit, and delay. But we're not going to let them win. Isaiah looked around the room at his team, exhausted but determined. They're playing defense because they know we have the truth on our side. Let's make sure the jury sees it. The cost of the fight. As the trial loomed closer, the personal toll of the case began to weigh on Isaiah. He received threatening emails and phone calls, some from anonymous sources, others from blatant racists emboldened by the mall's PR narrative. His law firm also faced increased scrutiny, with reporters digging into their past cases and motives. One evening, Isaiah's closest friend, Daniel Walker, visited him at home. Daniel was a fellow lawyer and one of the few people who truly understood the weight Isaiah carried. You look exhausted, Daniel said, handing Isaiah a beer. I am, Isaiah admitted, but I can't stop. This case, it's bigger than me. Daniel nodded. I know, just don't forget to take care of yourself. The fight won't mean anything if you burn out before it's over. Isaiah smiled faintly. Don't worry about me. I've been through worse. The emotional catalyst. The night before the trial began, Isaiah visited his mother's grave. Standing in the quiet cemetery, he placed a hand on the polished headstone, the cool granite grounding him. I'm doing this for people like you, he said softly. People who gave everything so their children could have a better world. I won't let them take that away. As he turned to leave, the wind rustled the leaves overhead, carrying with it a sense of quiet resolve. Isaiah walked back to his car, ready for the battle ahead. A rising storm. By the time the trial began, the stage was set. The mall's negligence, Martin Blake's history, and the courage of those willing to speak out created a case that transcended the courtroom. Isaiah knew the road ahead would be grueling, but he also knew he wasn't fighting alone. Every step, every piece of evidence, and every testimony would bring him closer to justice, not just for himself, but for everyone who had been silenced or ignored. The storm was here, and Isaiah was ready to face it head-on. The trial begins. A high-stakes arena. The courtroom buzzed with quiet tension as the trial officially commenced. It was standing room only, with journalists, activists, and curious citizens packed into the gallery. Isaiah Carter entered the room with quiet confidence, his presence commanding. Despite the weight of the case, he walked with dignity, his crutches tapping softly against the polished floor. Across the room, Martin Blake sat with his legal team. His demeanor was defiant, though the strain in his posture betrayed his unease. Beside him, Victoria Hale, the mall's lead attorney, wore her usual composed expression, ready to dismantle the case with her razor-sharp arguments. The judge entered, and the room fell silent. The stage was set. Opening statements. Setting the tone. Sophia Nguyen delivered the opening statement for the prosecution. Her voice was steady, each word carefully chosen to resonate with the jury. This case is not just about an act of violence, she began. It's about a system that enabled that violence. A system that ignored warnings, dismissed complaints, and prioritized convenience over accountability. Today, you will hear from witnesses who were silenced, see evidence that was buried, and understand the true cost of negligence. Victoria Hale countered with her own opening. A clinical and methodical dismissal of the claims. The plaintiffs want you to believe this is about systemic failure, she said, her tone almost patronizing. But the evidence will show that this was an isolated incident, an unfortunate misunderstanding. Nothing more. Isaiah listened without reaction, though he felt the familiar simmer of anger beneath his calm exterior. Hale's words were designed to deflect, to minimize, but he knew the truth would prevail. The testimonies, voices of truth, The prosecution called their first witness, Rachel Liu. As she took the stand, her hands trembled slightly, but her resolve was clear. "Tell us what you saw that day," Sophia prompted. Rachel described the incident in vivid detail, her voice gaining strength as she spoke. "He didn't just trip him. He deliberately kicked Isaiah's crutch out from under him. It wasn't an accident, it was malicious." Victoria Hale attempted to undermine Rachel's credibility, suggesting she was seeking attention by filming the event. But Rachel held her ground. "I didn't record it for attention," she said firmly. "I recorded it because what I saw was wrong." Next came Lisa Howard, the former mall employee. She recounted Martin's history of racist remarks and aggressive behavior. "He shouldn't have been working there," she said. "Everyone knew he was a problem. But management didn't care." Hale again tried to discredit the testimony, suggesting Lisa had a personal vendetta against the mall. But Sophia countered, presenting corroborating evidence, other employees' complaints and an HR memo acknowledging Martin's behavior. The most emotional moment came when Andre Williams took the stand. His voice cracked as he described the humiliation of being attacked by Martin years earlier. "He treated me like I wasn't human," Andre said, tears streaming down his face. "And the mall let him get away with it." The turning point, the emails. The trial's pivotal moment came when Marcus Torres introduced the internal emails he had uncovered. The courtroom fell silent as the jury read messages from mall managers describing Martin as a ticking time bomb. One email even warned, "If this guy stays, it's only a matter of time before something happens." Sophia presented the emails with precision, driving home the mall's culpability. These weren't just red flags, they were blaring sirens. The mall had every opportunity to act, and they chose to look the other way. Victoria Hale's confidence faltered for the first time. Her attempts to argue the emails were out of context, rang hollow in the face of their clear implications. Isaiah's testimony, a voice of resolve. When Isaiah took the stand, the courtroom leaned in, hanging on his every word. He recounted the incident at the mall with raw honesty, describing not just the physical pain but the emotional toll. "What happened to me wasn't just an attack on my body," he said. "It was an attack on my dignity, on my humanity. And it wasn't the first time, because people like Martin Blake are allowed to act with impunity." Over and over again, Sophia asked, "Why did you choose to pursue this case, Mr. Carter?" Isaiah's gaze swept the room. "Because silence allows injustice to grow. Because if I didn't stand up, who would? This isn't just about me, it's about everyone who has been made to feel less than, who has been silenced or ignored. This case is for them." Closing arguments. A battle of perspectives. In her closing argument, Sophia painted a compelling picture of systemic failure. "The evidence is clear," she said. "Martin Blake was a danger from the moment he was hired. And the mall knew it. They chose to ignore the risks. And Isaiah paid the price. Today, you have the power to send a message that negligence and prejudice will not be tolerated." Victoria Hale's closing was methodical but lacked the emotional weight of Sophia's. She focused on technicalities, arguing the mall could not be held responsible for one employee's actions. "This case is built on speculation and assumptions," she said. "The plaintiffs want you to punish the mall for something they couldn't have foreseen." The jury retired to deliberate, and the courtroom buzzed with anticipation. The verdict, a moment of justice. After 2 days of deliberation, the jury returned with their decision. The courtroom fell silent as the foreperson stood. "On the charge of negligence, we find the mall guilty. On the charge of assault, we find Martin Blake guilty." The gallery erupted in murmurs of relief and satisfaction. Isaiah closed his eyes, a wave of emotion washing over him. It wasn't just a personal victory, it was a victory for everyone who had suffered in silence. The judge ordered substantial damages to be paid to Isaiah and mandated the mall implement sweeping reforms, including stricter hiring practices and anti-discrimination training. Martin Blake was sentenced to prison, his defiance replaced by visible regret. The ripple effect. The verdict sent shockwaves through the community. Activists hailed it as a landmark case, and other victims of workplace discrimination and negligence began coming forward. The mall, facing public pressure, announced a complete overhaul of its policies. Isaiah became a reluctant public figure, his story inspiring others to stand up against injustice. He used the platform to advocate for systemic change, speaking at universities, community centers, and legal conferences. This isn't the end, he told a packed auditorium. This is the beginning. Real change takes time, effort, and courage, and we all have a role to play. A personal triumph. Months later, Isaiah visited the community center where he had mentored Darius. The young man approached him with a broad smile. "You did it," Darius said. "You proved that the system can work." Isaiah nodded. "It worked because we didn't give up. Because we believed in something bigger than ourselves." As he left the center, Isaiah felt a deep sense of fulfillment. The scars of the past remained, but they no longer defined him. He had turned his pain into power, his struggle into a beacon of hope. And though the fight for justice was far from over, Isaiah knew he would never stop pushing forward a case that captured the nation. The verdict in Isaiah's case became the focal point of a national conversation about systemic racism, accountability, and the legal system's role in shaping societal change. News outlets replayed clips of the trial, focusing on Isaiah's powerful testimony and the incriminating internal emails. Hashtags like #JusticeForAll and #AccountabilityMatters trended for weeks, sparking debates in living rooms, classrooms, and corporate boardrooms. For Isaiah, the attention was both a blessing and a challenge. As a lawyer, he was used to navigating complex legal battles. But now, he found himself thrust into the role of a public figure. His story dissected and discussed by millions. Every interview, every public appearance became an opportunity to advocate for broader change. The aftermath for the mall. The fallout for the mall was swift and severe. Their corporate reputation was in tatters. Their negligence laid bare for all to see. Consumer boycotts and protests outside their stores forced the management to act decisively. In a public statement, the mall's CEO announced sweeping reforms. "We acknowledge the failures that allowed this incident to occur," he said, effective immediately. "We are implementing new policies, including rigorous background checks for all employees, mandatory diversity and sensitivity training, and the establishment of an independent oversight committee." For Isaiah, the reforms were a step in the right direction, but they were also a reminder of how much work remained. "Policies are only as good as the people enforcing them," he said in an interview. "True accountability requires vigilance and a commitment to change at every level." Martin Blake's reckoning. Martin Blake's sentencing was a somber moment. In court, he sat slumped, his defiance replaced by a mix of anger and regret. When asked if he had anything to say, he muttered, "I never meant for things to go this far." Isaiah watched from the gallery, his expression unreadable. He didn't feel satisfaction at Martin's downfall, only a quiet resolve to ensure the lessons of this case were not forgotten. As Martin was led away, Isaiah thought about the countless others like him, men and women who had used their positions of power to harm others. Believing they were untouchable, this victory was a message to them. Accountability was coming. The personal cost of justice. Though the verdict was a triumph, the battle had taken its toll on Isaiah. He often found himself replaying the incident at the mall in his mind, the humiliation and pain bubbling to the surface in quiet moments. His friends and colleagues noticed the change. One evening, his close friend and fellow lawyer, Daniel Walker, visited Isaiah at his home. They sat on the balcony overlooking the city, the air heavy with unspoken emotions. "You've been quiet lately," Daniel said, breaking the silence. "What's on your mind?" Isaiah sighed. "Winning the case doesn't erase what happened. It doesn't erase the look in Martin's eyes when he kicked my crutch, or the way people stared at me like I was broken." Daniel nodded. "But it does show people that they can fight back, that they don't have to accept injustice." Isaiah smiled faintly. "I know. I just wish it didn't have to hurt so much." A ripple effect. Empowering others. In the months following the trial, Isaiah received letters and emails from people across the country, victims of discrimination, survivors of workplace harassment, and ordinary citizens inspired by his story. Many shared their own struggles, asking for advice or simply thanking him for standing up. One letter stood out. It was from a young man named Jamal, who had been wrongfully terminated from his job after reporting a racist supervisor. "Your story gave me the courage to file a complaint," Jamal wrote. "I don't know if I'll win, but at least I'm not afraid anymore." Isaiah read the letter twice, his chest tightening. This was why he had fought so hard, not just for his own justice, but to empower others to seek theirs. A conversation with Rachel Liu, the woman who had recorded the incident. remained a steadfast ally. She visited Isaiah's office one afternoon, carrying a portfolio of research and ideas. "I've been thinking," Rachel said, sitting across from him. "This case is just one example of a much bigger problem. What if we started something, an organization? Maybe, to help people like you and Andre Williams? People who don't have the resources to fight back on their own." Isaiah leaned back in his chair, considering her words. "It's a good idea. There are too many people who fall through the cracks because they can't afford legal representation or don't know their rights." Rachel's eyes lit up. "Exactly. We could provide legal aid, organize community workshops, maybe even advocate for policy changes." Isaiah smiled. "Let's do it." The birth of a movement. With Rachel's help, Isaiah founded the Carter Justice Initiative, a nonprofit organization dedicated to fighting systemic discrimination and promoting workplace accountability. The initiative quickly gained traction, attracting support from lawyers, activists, and philanthropists. The organization's first project was a community legal clinic, offering free consultations to low-income individuals facing discrimination or harassment. They also launched a series of workshops titled Know Your Rights, educating people about how to recognize and address workplace misconduct. Isaiah's team from the trial, including Sophia and Marcus, volunteered their time to support the initiative. For them, the fight for justice had become a shared mission, a way to channel their skills into meaningful change. A personal victory. Months after the trial, Isaiah returned to the mall, not to shop, but to confront his memories. The atrium looked the same, but something felt different. The space no longer held the weight of that day. It was just a mall now, a place, not a symbol. As he stood near the escalator, a young man approached him. "Mr. Carter?" the man asked hesitantly. Isaiah turned, nodding. "Yes, I just wanted to say thank you." The man said, "What you did, it mattered. My sister was harassed at work. And because of you, she found the courage to report it." Isaiah smiled, his chest swelling with quiet pride. "Tell her she's stronger than she knows." Looking ahead, as the first anniversary of the trial approached, Isaiah was invited to speak at a university. Standing before a crowd of students, he reflected on the journey that had brought him there. This case wasn't just about one man's actions, he said, it was about the systems that allow prejudice and negligence to thrive. Change doesn't happen because of one lawsuit or one verdict. It happens when each of us takes a stand, when we refuse to accept the status quo. The students erupted into applause, their faces filled with hope and determination. For Isaiah, it was a reminder that the fight for justice was far from over, but it was a fight worth continuing. A legacy of justice. Isaiah's journey had begun with pain, but it ended with purpose. The Carter Justice Initiative became a beacon of hope for countless individuals, its impact growing with each passing year. Isaiah's name became synonymous with resilience and justice, his story a testament to the power of standing up against oppression. And though the scars of his experience remained, they no longer defined him. Isaiah had turned his pain into progress, his struggle into strength. He had become more than a survivor, he had become a force for change.